Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, featuring the sharpest minds in marketing, inspirational case histories, and weekly insights you can apply to your business. Find out why top CMOs rank this podcast among their favorites. Now, here's your host, Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Neisser.
Hello, Renegade Thinkers. This is an unusual episode for an unusual time. I thought we should talk about leadership in a crisis, since that is exactly where we are. I've thought about this quite a bit. In fact, I recorded one episode that I completely scrapped. My experience dealing with crises goes way back to 9/11, to 2008. And what I found is that the most important thing that leaders do is stay positive and have a plan. And that doesn't mean the plan's going to be perfect, but it does mean you're going to have a plan. And so what I wanted to do in this episode was give you just a very broad framework for thinking about this crisis and getting control over your own head right now. Because I think that's the hardest part, is we're seeing the news and we're seeing all this bad stuff happening. And there's a lack, you just feel like you don't have any control over the circumstance. So I want you to get a little pen out, blank piece of paper, and in the very center of it, draw a little circle. You're going to do a bullseye here. In the very circle, you're going to put you and your family. And then we're going to surround that circle by employees. And then we're going to surround that circle by your customers. And then the last circle will be prospects and the world at large. I put you at the very center of this because you are the center of your universe. We are. The term I comes into play here. And I want you to just make sure that you're taking care of yourself and your family, and you're thinking about their health, and you're making decisions that are in everybody's interest in your family. So, for example, if you're still going into work because you think that's the right thing to do, but you're not taking precautions, that would be a bad decision right now, because that would not be putting yourself in the center. If you're working like crazy, that's fine. Obviously, this is a crisis, but make sure that you're taking some time off. I know it's really hard to get exercise right now. That's why people are using bikes so much. But take care of yourself, because so many people are relying on you as the rock, as the leader, to be healthy and to be optimistic and to have a plan, that you need to stop and think, am I doing all the things the CDC recommends, not just sending them out in an email? Now let's talk about you as the leader of your marketing department and a senior executive at your organization. I'm going to assume that you're either on a crisis management team or have a direct line into that. And those folks are thinking about all the implications of this crisis for your business. So as we think about this from an internal standpoint, you again, there's a sense of tempered optimism. We will get through this, but we need contingency plans. So as the leader of your organization, or at least your department, you're thinking about safety, right? That's first and foremost. And I talked to, I actually, in writing, interviewed 7 CMOs about what their action plan has been as it relates to the COVID-19 crisis. And the first thing that everybody talked about, of course, was safety. What are we doing for employee safety? And the answer has been work from home, #WFH. Many of them have limited travel, if not canceled travel completely. In fact, there was only one of the folks that I talked to that hadn't completely canceled travel. That was Mandy Dhaliwal of Dell Boomi. And the reason they hadn't completely transferred travel is that there was some customer service needs that might require emergency service, and therefore someone would have to get on a plane to go somewhere or get in a car. So we're thinking safety first, right? That's fine. That's good. It's really important. That has led to the cancellation, of course, of events. But the thing I want you to be thinking about is the well-being of your employees. So one of the implications of everybody working at home, if you're not used to working at home, the sense of isolation is going to be pretty significant. There's also, because of the craziness with hoarding right now, there could be food shortages. There's certainly toilet paper shortages. So one of the things that I think CMOs could be thinking about with your employees is just checking in and say, hey, you got enough supplies? And maybe getting the team together virtually and saying, hey, who has an excess of something just in case it's needed? So that, again, you're putting yourself in this situation and saying, I can help. I can help because I can lead the team through this. In terms of practical things, I mean, if you're not used to working at home, then you're not used to Slack and perhaps using Zoom, video conferencing. This is something that cultures that work at home all the time have in place and are used to. So this may take some training. And I know a lot of companies with lots of employees are suddenly faced with folks never using Slack, not using Zoom. So have a little patience with those folks, but you personally have a chance to get on, do a Zoom meeting, do one, and maybe you need to do one every day. Now, here's an interesting thought. Because no one's commuting anymore, a lot of people had a half an hour commute. Maybe that's an opportunity. That's a time where you can get with your employees, and I'll talk about later when we talk about our customers, and just have a chat and say, what's your plan today? It's interesting. Some people are concerned that because their employees are working, they're not going to get as much done. And if you've had remote workforce in place before, you know it's just not true. David Baker, who's a great consultant in the service area, said people can be lazy anywhere. And I think that's so true. It is important, however, as a leader, that it is clear what is expected of folks. And it's so easy to keep the news on all day, and it's to look at things. And what maybe needs to happen is you say, okay, we're going to work. We're going to have play. And then we're all going to get on and just talk about the problems and share what we've heard and make sure that people are getting the right information from the right sources. So rather than ignoring the gorilla in the room, we say we're going to take some time now and we're going to focus on that so we can have that moment and then we can somehow or other get back to work. So this whole issue of productivity, I think, is going to be on the minds of not just CMOs, but all leaders. What's interesting here is, again, the companies that have distributed workforces are way ahead of the game. And that, since that's the future, this is the time to test your skills as a leader of a remote workforce. Start to test things. What do you need to do to check in, to know what's going on, to motivate, to set goals, to say, okay, we're all going to get through this together. And lastly, this is a really good time to focus on agility. Sarah Larsen, who is the CMO at Brightcove, mentioned that her biggest takeaway from this experience is the need for agility. And she shared, while marketers are usually an agile bunch, this is an extraordinary time, so be available and help problem solve. We're the creative thinkers of the organization. Perhaps it's time to reach out to your peers in other departments and say, what are the challenges that you're facing? Maybe we marketing wizards can help you solve them. I want to recap this section by simply saying, you've thought about yourself and you made sure that you're staying healthy and you're doing good things to take care of you and your family. You've thought about your employees and how they are feeling and how you're showing empathy and optimism, tempered optimism. It's not Pollyanna time. There's a little sense of realism will go a long way. But we're going to get through this, and we're going to get through it by really taking advantage of the marketing muscles that we have, the creative muscles that we have to solve new kinds of problems, maybe anticipate some of those problems. But think about your employees first. Make sure that they're at the top of your list for everything that you as a leader can do for them right now. And it may mean there's problems that they're facing that you just haven't thought about yet. So make sure you're talking to them, if not daily, weekly. And make sure that your direct reports know that this is a top priority for you. All right. So we focused on, first, in the very center of this bullseye, you've got yourself and your family. We've expanded to that to your employees, making sure you're taking care of them. Now, let's talk about your customers. Now more than ever, you will show your true colors. You will show whether you are partners with these folks or not. Now, the first thing that almost every company that I interviewed in the last couple weeks mentioned and noted is that they've canceled events and they've canceled on-site visits. Now, this has a huge ripple effect on your entire ecosystem. It is not a small thing that these events have been canceled. It means that there's less training going on. It means that, because a lot of events like this are user events where there's training, there's a lot of networking that didn't happen, so ideas weren't shared. So one of the things that it begs is, okay, with a world, at least in the next 3 months, without any physical events, what can a marketer do? What can a marketer do to fill this gap? So I spent a lot of time this weekend looking for really good virtual event solutions. And unfortunately, I didn't find any, but maybe some of you listening have more experience in this area. To me, I think the answer is to rethink your mega event experience on a much smaller scale. Focus on 50 to 100 people as opposed to 1,000 people. And for that, you can use Zoom, and it's probably the best solution out there. So think about, what are your micro events going to be like? Are you going to do a lot of AMAs or Ask Me Anythings? Are there lessons of crisis management that you can share with your customers? So as we're looking for substitutes for big events one-to-one, we're going to have to recognize that this is going to be impossible to produce them. There's nothing that can really substitute for individual one-on-one interaction. So we're going to think about this very differently. We're going to think about more webinars and more AMAs and more things that you can do. And we're going to schedule these at different times. What I think is interesting right now is people aren't commuting. So maybe there's some time to take advantage of. And maybe you do things from 8 and 9 in the morning. Another thing to think about is that people, when they work at home, tend to work odd hours. So does this mean, for example, that maybe instead of having live chat from business hours, you have live chat all the time? Because your customers might be working at different hours. It's something that you could at least test in the short term. I do think that live chat is going to be more important than less. Another thought to be thinking about is you've got a bunch of people who were used to dealing with inbound calls, perhaps on your service team, or that we're also doing your we're doing your customer support via live chat. Maybe it's time to use those folks for outbound and just do some calls, a series of calls that say, hey, how you doing? How's your family? How's your company holding up? How is this impacting your business? Those calls could go a long way. And as you talk to those customers, you may also be able to gather information on the solutions that they're coming up with to deal with this crisis, both in terms of managing remote employees and help supporting their customers and maybe even acquiring new customers. And so as you look at your customer support team as potentially an outbound resource that's going to be gathering information that you can feed back into the loop, it's something positive that you can do, and it will make those employees feel good because they're participating in solutions, not just sort of waiting for, the axe to fall. And I think there's going to be so much fear right now. They talk about idle hands. Really need to think about how we can deploy people to help get towards solutions. I did want to make a note here. There's another opportunity here for you as a leader of your department and your organization. And maybe it's what was going to be inevitable anyway, but interesting that Alicia Tillman, CMO of SAP, said, "This is an unprecedented moment in time for all businesses, making the need for contingency planning essential." And, she mentioned that they had already canceled SAP Concur, Fusion SAP, Ariba Live, X4 SAP Now, and participation in all their third-party events. Now, of course, they're looking at doing these events digitally. And her thought is, while remote won't replace the power of face-to-face communication, it may transform the way we conduct business moving forward. And this is a great opportunity to strengthen our digital offerings. So in other words, there's a product opportunity here because if you're going to be, everybody's going to be working remotely and we're going to be in this new sort of virtual world, then you as an organization have an opportunity now to test, one, how your employees engage digitally, how you engage with your customers digitally, and making sure that you have the latest in this. Also heard from another CMO who thought this is the end of the old way of doing business, that this is, everything that e-commerce and the internet brought is now going to be a new reality. And as a result, anything that you can do and learn from this currently, even test to help you make sure that you are sort of, I'm going to say 99% digital, with the ability to have a remote workforce and remote customer service and all of those things, now is the time. Just to put a cherry on the top of that idea, one of the folks that I interviewed, Mandy Dhaliwal of Dell Boomi, mentioned that this problem, the situation that we're currently in, sort of help in some ways they were prepared for. And what she said, and I quote, one of Boomi's key differentiators is that we can manage our customers' data management and data integration platforms remotely without being on site. Our centralized cloud-based management of Boomi's platform is key for this remote work situation. And she continues to say, all of our users are able to continue working with their on-premise integrations just as easily from home as they can from their offices. A lot of our work can be done remotely, such as maintenance activities. It is so valuable, especially with today's situation. Now, I know that sounded a bit like a commercial, but the point is that because of the way they're structured and the fact that their work product is in the cloud, they were prepared in some ways for this situation. If your work isn't in the cloud already, this is the moment where you realize, whoa, we better have everything that we need to operate up there in the cloud. Now, speaking of being in the cloud, I thought Sara Varni, who is the CMO of Twilio, had an interesting insight. She talked about, since they're getting rid of their corporate sponsored events and any third-party industry events, how do they stay in touch with their developer community? And so what she has done is followed the developers and saying, well, they're on Hacker News and Stack Overflow and Twitch and Facebook groups, so surely they need to be there too. Makes a lot of sense. Follow your customers, find out where they're going, and meet them as opposed to trying to get them to come to you. So as we wrap up this section on the customer centricity as something that we always talk about on this show, I wanted to share one other example from Jeff Perkins, who is the CMO of ParkMobile. And what he describes is, he says, we have been in constant communication with our clients during this time. They work with a lot of venues that are canceling events, and so they've had to issue refunds for parking and communicate that to the users, to their users. It's his key insight is being transparent and working our way through it. That's really all any of us can do, right? Is be transparent and work our way through it. Interestingly, and I'm sure most of you are doing this as well, they're posting updates on their website because people want to know what you're doing in this crisis. Now we have to look at the broader world. We've talked about employees. Actually, we put you at the circle, and we talked about your family, and then your employees, your employee family, then your customer family. Now, how about your prospects and the rest of the world? With every crisis comes an opportunity. This is the moment when leaders are tested. We've already talked about that. And you're going to be tested on a moral purpose basis. Imagine for a moment you were Brightcove and you're Zoom. The demand for your services are going to skyrocket. And there could be a temptation to really try to profit on this situation. That would be known as profiteering. And what's interesting is I was able to talk to Sarah Larsen of Brightcove as well as Janine Pelosi, the CMO of Zoom. And both of them independently, by the way, I didn't talk to them. That was a written interview. But both of them independently had the same reaction, and their companies had the same reaction. I want to quote from Janine Pelosi. She said, "We believe every business has the social responsibility to contribute back to the community and to society, and it's critically important during these times of crises." So by way of example, she noted a couple of things that Zoom is doing, and I'm going to quote, "We temporarily lifted the 40-minute limit on meetings with more than 2 participants for our basic free users in China, providing unlimited time to collaborate. We've also temporarily lifted the 40-minute limit on meetings from our basic offering for K-12 schools in certain countries. And," I continue in quotes, "we're scheduling information sessions and making on-demand resources available so anyone can learn how to use the Zoom platform with ease and at their convenience." So there's an opportunity to do a little good or do well by doing good. On a similar vein, Sarah Larsen, who was the CMO of Brightcove, the video streaming service, has had to cancel their big event, which is their biggest annual event. And so they are pushing that to make that video powered and do it online. But they're also very aware of what's going on. And they heard from their customers in Asia about the need for video solutions, right? Because suddenly you're going remote. So if you think about this, some companies are going to really struggle to have what's called business continuity. They're going to have, how do they keep their businesses going and keep them moving forward? So I'm going to quote Sarah Larsen. She said, "We quickly put into action Brightcove's continuity offer, which provides organizations with 50 hours of live streaming at no cost." Again, here's an example of a company that people are going to be leaning into, and they're capitalizing, but they're not being profiteers. And so there's a subtle difference here, but this is where it really helps to have a moral compass and a North Star. We've talked about doing well by doing good. I think there's another important part of this that I want all of you to do right now. Go back and look at your ads and your Instagram feed and make sure none of them seem tone deaf. In other words, if you are talking about, in fact, we found an Instagram post that we did for one of our clients who has a very humorous brand, and it mentioned a zombie apocalypse. Now, this was probably 4 months ago, but we're going to actually go back and remove that from the feed just because we don't want to have this brand seem tone deaf. If you have an ad that shows a bunch of people crowded together, it's probably time to take that down. You may have a big crowd on your website of people because we like to show people crowding together. Maybe you don't want to have that there right now because it just reminds people of the fact that they can't get together. Now, that could be an overreaction. I look forward to hearing what you think. But now is the time, and this could go on for a while we don't want to make new knee-jerk reactions. No brand wants to risk appearing as tone deaf. So make sure you're doing a review of every single marketing material you have out there. If you have direct mail going out right now that was supposed to go to the office, put that on hold, right? Nobody's going to be there to sign for it. It's a problem. I mean, a lot of ABM programs depend on high-impact direct mail. Unfortunately, that isn't going to work right now because, again, no one's going to be in the office to receive them. Next up is the question of content. How much content needs to be COVID related. I mean, everybody has already created their COVID email. I'm assuming, Renegade did it, and I got at least 30 over the weekend from various brands about what their COVID policy is. So what's after that? What can you do to help your customers and prospects through this, the challenges that are being created by this pandemic? And I thought it was interesting that Paul Sparrow, who is the area managing director and CMO with Chief Outsiders, they're an organization that puts part-time CMOs in place. He talked about that you really need to think about sharing a variety of resources and tools that your clients can take advantage of or help. So, for example, they posted on their website canceled conferences, 7 quick tactics to make up the demand gap, and tips on working remote for companies that work in brick and mortar. I thought those are 2 pretty good examples of how you can be in the moment without feeling like you are, again, profiteering. You're educating, you're providing content that is in the moment. I mean, anybody who has insight into virtual conferencing, now is the time to write about it. If you have insights into managing and motivating workforces that are remote, now is the time to talk about those kinds of things. Those will be very helpful. I think it's also a very good time to put out content that is optimistic, that will remind us that the sun will rise tomorrow, and at some point we will be through it. There's a question of whether or not one should be humorous. I don't think this is the time to suddenly become funny, but if your brand had a sense of humor, and we have a client that has that, there's no reason to suddenly to become somber. It's not gallows humor. It's just humor, and we all appreciate it, and frankly, we kind of need it more than ever. So if you've been humorous, thank you. Keep going. So finally, to wrap this thing up, I wanted to suggest that there's an opportunity here for us to come together as people, as employees, as marketers, as citizens of the world, and think about and share how we can be part of the solution moving forward. Now, I'm not talking about the pandemic because we're already taking action there, but I'm talking about the recovery. And I'm just wondering, and I would welcome any ideas that you all have that are corporate initiatives or shared initiatives where we marketers can step up and help in the post-pandemic world bring us together and show how much we actually really care. All right, that's all I got. I'm expecting you all to have a bunch of more ideas that you're going to share with me as soon as you can. You know I love hearing from you. My cell, 917-679-8852. I'm waiting for your texts. I hope you all are staying safe and being smart and making a difference. Until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.